Winter pressed its chill fingers against the windows, the heavy glass fogged up in ghostly swirls. The house on Via Salaria pulsed with a warmth that came less from the radiators and more from the tightly packed crowd. My family gathered for what was supposed to be just another Sunday dinner. My mother's roast, the kind with crisp, salted skin, sizzled between the idle knives and forks. The room smelled of rosemary and garlic and the sweet tang of disappointment. Espressos steamed. Evenings like this had a rhythm, jokes about politics and football volleying between my uncle and cousin over plates, punctuated by the clinking of cheap wine glasses. But that night, I didn't feel the warmth or the rhythm. I only felt the tension mounting, invisible but substantial as wet wool. I'd waited until dessert, hoping I'd find the words or, failing that, the courage. My napkin twisted in my lap, a little rope of anxiety. My nephew, barely 10, had asked if I'd help him with his art project, and in the hush that followed my father asked, "And what about your own projects, Matteo?" My cousin Dario snorted, his teeth flashing as he cut into a slice of torta. "You mean his silly sewing? Maybe you'll make us all matching scarves next Christmas." There was subtle laughter, gentle but enough to let me know that my family took my projects as lightly as ever. I sat up a little straighter, voice low. "I've decided," I said. "I want to be a designer, fashion, clothes. I want to study at the Accademia di Costume e di Moda here, full-time." The only sound was the tapping of a spoon against a dessert plate. I saw my mother's lips press together. My father's face turned from me to his glass, looking for answers in the swirl of red. My younger sister Bianca's brow crinkled as she quickly glanced away. I felt myself shrinking, like too tight jeans after a spin in the wash. "A designer," my father repeated, as if testing my words for weight. "In Rome, of all places, when there's real work to do." He gestured vaguely, encompassing the haulage business, the shops, the calloused hands that had built what little fortune we had. "We all have dreams when we're young," he said, voice flat, "but then we must wake up. That's how families survive." There was a bitter comfort in his certainty, a logic that ran so deep I could almost hear my grandfather's voice echo in his. I looked down at my palms, wishing they didn't tremble. Dario piped up again, ever the performer. "Let him design. Maybe one day we'll see his dresses in the market stalls next to the cheap handbags. Maybe he'll get rich sewing slippers." A scoff swept the table. My cheeks burned, but I didn't flinch. My resolve had been woven from those very moments of being unseen, untrusted, considered foolish. I imagined turning that feeling into fabric, into something beautiful. "I'm serious," I said quietly. "I've already applied. I don't need money from this family," my mother finished. She didn't look angry, only scared. I'd seen that look before, each time she'd worried about me straying off course. "We cannot support this hobby." Silence then, the silence I'd come to know not as peace but as held breath, as an absence filling every crack between us. I stood to clear the plates and not one hand reached out to stop me. When I walked up the narrow staircase that night, I moved as if I were already leaving. The next morning, I left early. The city was grey, and the Tiber's lazy current reflected only the dullness of the sky above. I walked past old men rolling dice by the fountains, past the bakeries already dusting the sidewalks in flour, a city waking to the familiar clamour of horns and voices. My dreams felt both too large and suddenly so small. The Accademia had replied. I had been accepted, tuition mostly covered by a scholarship. I could not count on more than that. No one at home mentioned my announcement. When I packed my few things, in an old duffel meant for summer holidays, they didn't offer hugs, only polite wishes and a strange, almost relieved silence. Rome was not the city of film sets, not to me. It was the city of cracked marble steps, of bustling crowds, of rain that soaked through cheap shoes. I moved into a cramped, peeling room above a laundry, the stench of detergent hanging over everything. My window looked out into an alley, the only color those impossible pink sunsets that crept through at evening. Studying at the Accademia was nothing like I imagined. My classmates arrived draped in layers of effortless silks. Some wore shoes that cost more than the rent on my entire floor. I had only my own tired boots and a handful of shirts stitched for myself, seams uneven, necklines a bit off. Often I saw the way they glanced over my sketches, shrugging, polite, rarely impressed. Professors critiqued without mercy. One called my palette mute, as if your spirit is still waiting for someone else's approval. I worked at night in a bakery, folding dough until my wrists ached, saving every tip for the next bolt of fabric. Morning classes bled into long evenings at my cramped desk. I watched Bianca's photos from home on my phone, blurry snapshots of Sunday leftovers, a family I hardly recognized growing smaller with distance. There were days I wanted to quit. Sometimes, after a failed critique or a day when I'd confused chiffon for organza, I found myself wandering to the Trevi fountain, pennies in hand, no wishes left. One spring night, my hands shaking from fatigue, I called my father. He answered, old habits dying hard, and listened as I told him I'd almost failed a design module. You need to eat better, he said. That much is clear. Have you thought again about working with your uncle? He could always use another driver. No, I said, a word so simple but for the first time wholly mine. I'll figure it out. Just tell Mama I'm fine, please. And I hung up, wishing I believed myself. I learned discipline and I learned hunger, the sharp edge of it, the way it focuses the mind. There's a kind of beauty born from necessity. With every patch I added to worn trousers, every second-hand button I turned into a minor flourish, I understood the language of limitations. After a year, one professor began to notice. Matteo, she said softly after I turned in a draped jacket inspired by river stones, you see the world through hardship but you translate it with grace. I didn't win awards, my name wasn't whispered at the big shows. But I was offered an internship, then a contract job. I worked behind the scenes, stitching hems, carrying bolts of fabric, learning the politics as well as the patterns. I kept my head down, knowing that every mistake would be twice as costly for someone like me. Years went by. I moved up slowly, shifting from menial roles to design assistant, then junior designer. All the while, I sent home birthday cards and holiday greetings, never mentioning the struggles or the rejections. My parents never visited. My sister wrote me letters, encouraging but hesitant, asking if I missed home. In the third year, I entered a competition, one of hundreds open to young Italian designers. The prompt was the reinvention of heritage, an old story told anew. I stitched my father's old work shirts, blue cotton faded by sun, into an evening dress. The collar became a neckline, the cuffs delicate bows at the shoulders. The skirt was cut from a faded tablecloth, once used for Sunday dinners, now pleated to move like water. I embroidered my mother's maiden initials at the hem. I did not expect to win. When the letter arrived with the gold seal, I stared at it for a long time before believing. An invitation to Milan Fashion Week, one piece, my piece, to walk among the celebrated. The haulage business was failing. I heard it from Bianca in a rare call. Maury shops were closing in the neighborhood. Dario was out of work. My father's cough had gotten worse. I invited them to Milan. They refused. My mother said, it's not our world. My father, we have enough to worry about here. But Bianca came. She sat in the back row, fingers biting into her purse, watching as my dress, stitched from scraps of our past, glided beneath the lights. Afterward, her eyes filled with pride. I hadn't noticed how much her hair had grown, the easy way she touched my shoulder as if just then she finally saw me, the years after passed in a blur. The dress won modest praise, a magazine column, then an offer from a Paris atelier to design a capsule collection. I traveled, my name growing from the bottom of the program notes to the small print of reviews. I bought better shoes, found a new flat with windows full of sky, but it never felt like enough. Every triumph was measured against that one moment, facing my family, their laughter and their doubts. I saw Rome growing older in my mind, my parents' hands lined and tired, the paint peeling from our old door. The years hadn't softened the hurt, but they had given me resilience. I found myself longing less for revenge, more for understanding. 4 winters had passed. My name appeared, finally, in a major Italian fashion magazine, beside a new label that bore my initials. The city's culture bureau sent an invitation for me to headline a fundraiser at the Palazzo Brancaccio, a place of gilt and faded grandeur. The event supported artisans from struggling neighborhoods, like ours. The organizers asked if I wanted to invite my family as guests of honor. I hesitated, finger hovering over the faded names in my address book. I sent the invitations anyway, half dreading, half hoping. On the night of the event, Rome shimmered with holiday lights. The palazzo's entrance was a parade of glass and marble. The smell of lilies and perfume hung heavily in the air. Waiters in black jackets floated between clusters of Rome's elite. I felt the weight of 100 eyes as I greeted sponsors, journalists, even an old professor who eyed my lapels and smiled. At 7, I saw them, my mother, father, Bianca, standing awkwardly near the edge of the hall. My father wore the only suit he owned, pressed so hard the fabric shone. My mother's dress was careful, modest, her hair pinned up as if for mass. Dario was not there, but I didn't mourn it. My father's cough seemed softer in the hush of the grand entrance. They approached shyly as if entering a stranger's home. Bianca squeezed my arm, my mother reached for my hand, her fingers cool, searching. "We saw your name on the board outside," she whispered. "It was very big." Before I could answer, the first models began their walk. My new collection was inspired by Rome itself, the ochre walls at dusk, the frescoes flaking above old doorways, the rush of color from market stalls. My designs streamed down the runway, asymmetric coats, silk blouses like rippling tapestries, trousers cut with the confident lines of old Roman statues. Each piece bore a small hidden detail from my childhood, an inside pocket, a carved button, a lining stitched with my grandmother's lace. The audience watched in polite interest. I watched only my family. My mother blinked rapidly as the lights shifted over the models. My father, usually incapable of silence, was utterly still. The final piece appeared, a dress cut from blue cotton and linen, the original competition garment, restored and refined for this show. It floated across the runway, the embroidery at the hem catching the light, a tribute to all that had come before. When the models finished, polite applause rippled. The organizer took the microphone. She introduced me as Matteo Russo of Via Salaria, making Rome's history live again. People pressed forward, asking for photos, a word, a signature. My family stood at the edge, uncertain. A journalist approached them, mistaking them for important patrons. "How does it feel," she asked, "to see your son achieve such success?" My mother stared at me, then at the group, her voice barely audible. "We always hoped he would find his place," she murmured, her accent thickening. "We just did not realize it would be here." My father cleared his throat. "He was always stubborn," he said. "That is a virtue sometimes." There was a glimmer in his eyes, a kind of pride filtered through disbelief. The journalist blinked, waiting. My father finally lifted his gaze, voice strong. "This is not our world," he said, echoing words he'd spoken years before. "But tonight it is, because it is his." Behind us, a projector cast my name on the wall. My father reached out, awkwardly, roughly, and clapped my shoulder. "You've done something I never could. You made your own way." There in the soft silence that followed, I felt the tension dissolve. It wasn't forgiveness, not quite, but something richer, acknowledgement earned through absence and return. As the crowd thinned and the city outside quieted, my mother pressed a folded envelope into my hand. "From everyone," she said simply. Inside, a small photograph, a family dinner long ago. "All of us together," laughter Medea, "all possibility." On the back, in her shaky hand, "Non tutti I sogni sono fatti per dormire," not all dreams are meant for sleeping. We left the palazzo together, stepping out into the cool air. The silence between us was different now, not absence but peace. We walked slow and close back down via Merulana, past the old grocers and pastry shops, Rome's heart beating steady and unchanging, even as ours finally found its rhythm.